Okay, this is my part two on the intro to the eSky Big Lama. You can see I've removed the fuselage and the main blades, and the first thing people ask is, where's the tail? Well, on the coaxials generally there is no tail. Your stabilizing versus a tail rotor is all in your 3-in-1 controller here, your electronic speed controller, your gyro, and what have you. And that's what you have here on the front end is there's two pieces. There's the 3-in-1 controller with your proportional and adjustments and what have you that I get into at another time. And on this side you have your receiver. And there's your antenna for your receiver. And you have your front motor and your back motor, and they control the two different shafts. This is the inner shaft. Okay, I'm sorry, this is the outer shaft. The inner shaft slides down inside this. So that results, you have two different gears. There's a black one on top in here that you can barely see, and then the white one, which I put the extreme modified gear on there. And anyway, each gear turns each shaft. So basically, you know, there's not a lot to it when you look at it. And of course you have your battery. Now I'll get into modifications in the next video, but I've shifted my battery forward about 60% to give me a little bit of better forward flight, and I've also added some weight in the nose. I'll go over that in part 3, the final video. Normally the battery would sit just about right here. So you can see how far forward I've moved the battery to give it a little bit better forward flight characteristics. But so that's basically it. There's not a lot to it. Now, you know, they talk about the extended shaft to help prevent blade strikes, but in all honesty, in the year that I've had this, and all the flying I've done, I've not had one single blade strike in flight. They've contacted the ground a few times, but you can see the difference. Here is the stock shaft on your left and the extended shaft on your right. And I think it's 15 millimeters, it's extended 15 millimeters. And they say that helps prevent the blade strikes, which it probably does. And it improves flight characteristics a little bit, a little more stability. But I flew it a long time with the stock shaft and never had a problem. But I went ahead and upgraded to the extended inner shaft. And I'll go over that in the next video as well. And so you can see it's very basic, very basic. And like I say, I have the super skids, which you can Google super skids and their website will come up. It's a much wider footprint, more stability when you're landing, taking off. But again, use training gear at first so you don't chew up your blades. One thing I want to mention about the blades that attach to your blade holders here is they're labeled. There's B blades, and then you have the A blades. A blades go on top, always. B blades on the bottom. And a common mistake that people will do is they'll interchange one of the blades. You'll have an A and B on top and an A and B on the bottom. The helicopter will not fly like that. It'll do crazy things. They have to be in their proper position. A blades on top, B blades on the bottom. Now these blades on the eSky Big Lama, the stock blades, they're plastic, they're pretty flimsy, but they do well. Aftermarket blades get a bit more expensive, but they too will break in a crash. So many of us have chosen just to stay with the stock blades and have plenty of on hand for replacement. Even if you crash and don't break or chip or split a blade, they get worn, they get bent and warped and what have you. So, you know, after a couple of crashes and the helicopter doesn't seem to be flying quite right, just slap on a new set of blades and you'll see a difference right off the bat. It'll be stable again, even though you can see no visible damage to the blades. It'll be much better and fly that much better. And here again is the fuselage, and there's your tail that everybody asks about. Can you fly it like this? Yeah, well, probably not really, because with the fuselage on, you have your aerodynamics, your center of gravity, everything kind of works together. If you try to fly it like this, you're going to have a little orientation problem unless you're keeping an eye on the front end and the skids. Otherwise, you might have a little tough time in the ear trying to figure out where the nose was at. These are brushless motors. The other Big Lama has I'm sorry, they're brushed motors. The other one has brushless conversion kit in it, which I won't go into for beginners. But these are the original motors. I have a spare stock set of motors that I've never used, and it's, you know, they've done and performed well. What I do though, when I have the canopy off, is there's bushings in here. I'll put just an absolute tiny drop of triflow oil there, and also on the bottom where the bushings are, and you can't see it because the battery's in there, the front and rear. Just a tiny drop, and that really makes the motor last a long time. So, you know, it's a good basic helicopter. You have your swash plate here, and that controls your forward and aft movement, and a little bit of the sideways movement of the helicopter. And so those are your basic components of the eSky Big Lama. You have your servo one on each side that controls these the two servos here. And, you know, it's pretty basic. It comes with a good diagram. They're easy to work on. One thing I'll mention is you have these little rubber mounts here that these small screws go into that hold the fuselage on the helicopter, the frame. This is plastic, and these are self-tapping screws, so this plastic wears out after you remove the fuselage several times. So what you want to do is go down to your local hardware store and take one of your original pieces of tubing. You go down there and buy a foot or two of tubing. And what I do is whenever the screws start backing out in flight and becoming loose because you've removed the canopy so many times, is just cut new tubing to length, put it on there, and put your screws in, and you're back in business with a nice tight mounted canopy. Because once they start backing out and getting loose, you'll get a lot of vibration in the canopy, and you'll be scratching your head trying to figure out where your vibrations are coming from. So it's real easy to change those out. You just remove the tubing and slip your new one on and put your screws in, or put your canopy on, put your screws in. This is your swash plate. These are your blade holders. Now, one thing about the extended shaft, now I'll get into that in the next video, but again, there's a difference between the stock on the right this time and the extended shaft by Extreme. They make a good shaft, and it is a good upgrade. So there it is. There's not much to the eSky Big Lama, and I'll go over some of the upgrades. I've already talked about the battery. You can see where I've made a piece of Tupperware there. It's kind of crude, but it works. And it shifts the center of gravity forward and gives you better flight control. Another thing I've done is taking the tie strap and putting it around the receiver and the 3-in-1 controller under the bracket here, because even so, you know, good hard crash. I have had this come off early on in a hard crash. So you want to put a little tie strap around there and to hold it in place. But as you can see, there's not much to the eSky Big Lama. Very simple, and that's why it's great for a trainer and great to learn on. So in the next video, part 3, I'll go over some of the mods that I've done and some of the things that you should be aware of on the Big Lama. So thanks again for watching, and part 3, the final episode, and going over the mods will be coming up shortly.